Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Leading Innovation at Work. I'm your host, Lorri Rowlandon, and I'm so excited today to be joined by the esteemed Rex Miller. You've heard me talk so much about Rex. He was in one of my top books of 2019 and part of the giveaway that we did earlier this year. He's a very accomplished author and has an amazing background. If you haven't seen Rex speak at an event, you really should just go to the event to see him speak, but you'll get a little glimpse of him today. The book that I recommended that he most recently published along with Michael O'Neill and Philip Williams is called The Healthy Workplace Nudge, How Healthy People, Culture, and Buildings Lead. And this is just one of the most profound books I've had around workplace and how it's a testimony to how HR and IT and real estate are all converging. And one of the things I just really love about this book, Rex, is that it really helps us quantify a topic that a lot of people view as being a little bit ethereal. And I thought you did such an articulate job in the book of really helping to understand the business case of wellness at work. So welcome to the show. Great to have you as a guest today.
Thank you, Lorri. And I enjoy I enjoy following behind you because you kind of open these doors and you connect with people all over the world. And so it's great for me to see the kind of work that you're doing too.
Oh, it's really my pleasure. And I think that's what we have to do. You know, we've talked about this at sidebars at a number of conferences, but I think the one thing we do have in common is we're so passionate about workplace and excellence and really being better, and your continuous passion for learning and educating is something that I really share, and that's one of the reasons why we make this conference free, is to really help forward and help people make progress against these topics that seem so complex or overwhelming, and breaking it down into, steps that people can implement today. So thank you so much for that. Hey, Rex, just before we get started in your presentation, I'm always so curious, and I ask, I think, every one of our guests this same question, because this topic didn't exist when we were kids. When we were in kindergarten, everybody wanted to be firemen and policemen and all those traditional paths, and this was not something that was developed yet. I'm always just so curious as to your career path. How did you end up being such an incredible spokesperson for this topic?
Well, that's a great question. It goes back to mom and dad and kind of how I'm wired. But I was always wired to be curious and to look at, just question why we do things the way we do. And my major at college was as a futurist. It was communications theory, but it was communication theory looking at how shifting communication platforms change culture, society, and organizations. Right out of college, I was teaching tennis and got engaged, needed a real job, so to speak. And I became a project manager in the architecture and construction department for Southwestern Bell in 1978. So I'm going on 41 years in this industry. But with that time frame, it was going through huge technological transition from analog switches to digital switches. In the United States, we were going through divestiture, where the big Bell operating companies were broken up to be competitive. We were shifting from private offices to cubicles. All of that was going on simultaneously. And so it was just a curiosity for me. I was working as a project manager, then moved into kind of the sales side, the other side of the fence, from owner to distributor, then distributor to manufacturer, and then manufacturer to subcontractor back again, but always within this mix of human performance in a changing world and a changing work environment. So necessity brought about kind of a rethinking and reinvention, and that was the dot-com crash in 1999 and 2000. I was a newly hired VP of sales at a distributor for Hayworth and this product called SMED. It's a Canadian product. It's a demountable wall. It's a construction project. And when the dot-com crash hit, we lost 70% of our revenue within 3 months. So one day, as fate would have it for the young hero, I walk into the office and my email is shut off, thinking there's a technological problem, but it was a bigger issue. And when I went to the tech person to ask could they help, they said, you need to go talk to the owner. So I went in to talk to the owner and he said, we don't need sales. We don't need a sales vice president, we need sales. So I had two choices, to either quit or go back into sales. So that began the reinvention process. And then moving, because no one was buying furniture, into construction back to my roots, I got deeply involved in the construction process as kind of lower level in the supply chain and seeing how it was just so dysfunctional. And I found a way to crack the code. And cracking the code was getting permission with a developer to come in very early and work with all the sub-trades to better coordinate. Well, that resulted in a big aha, that the systems that we have are so outdated that they drive lots of waste and inefficiency. And that led to the commercial real estate revolution research that we did on why 70% of projects come in late, over budget, and everybody hates each other at the end of the project. And that kind of led the course. So we went from dysfunction in people trying to deliver projects. That then led to disengagement in the workplace. So the same group we brought together to research project delivery, I was challenged one day by the head of global real estate from Google, who said, we believe you can provide and deliver things cheaper and better and safer, but we don't believe your industry can help us solve our business issues, such as engagement and attracting and retaining talent. That then led to the next research project. And each research project was unique because we collected 100 plus experts and corporate leaders to tackle a problem that I had no clue what the solution was. But the process we created with the diverse leadership allowed us to go deeply, getting to root cause. And then that second project ended in Change Your Space, Change Your Culture. Well, one story in that book was the CBRE headquarters project and their new well-certified space. I went to interview them about the change management side of their story because it was a really great story about, it's just a prototypical example of great change leadership. And the story is that if a leader admits that they really have no clue on how to do it, but we can do it together, and you have a process where you collectively discover the outcome, you can do that. I missed the well-certified building side of the story because it was 2013. They were the very first. I wasn't looking for it. I was at my book deadline, and there's only a paragraph in the book about CBRE's well-certified space. The book comes out, CBRE's ordering hundreds of copies of books at a time, and I go back and ask why, and they say, well, there's this well building thing we did. And the paragraph in your book, we've had 15,000 visitors in 18 months. So I said, there's a story behind that. And so I went out to see the story, came back to the group that had done the previous two projects and said, I think we got another project in front of us. There's this thing called wellness and the well-certified space. Anything that's gotten 15,000 visitors in 15 months, there's something going on. So we, again, gathered kind of a core team of some of the top firms in the world to just talk about what are the implications here. We came away with two conclusions. One is our industry knows nothing about wellness, yet we're going out to conferences talking about meditation rooms and workout spaces. And number two, there seems to be a bigger issue here than what we realize. So my whole journey has been one thread. It's like pulling the thread of a sweater. You begin to pull it, and you begin to find that it leads to another thing and another thing. The common connection is the human story in the workplace. And each one has tended to lead to a deeper and deeper question about what's it doing to us? What's the workplace doing to us? Engagement, projects, but now it's from a health and wellness standpoint.
I love the story of your journey. And I think in another episode, one of the things we're going to talk about is what skills do you need for the future? And you've demonstrated that in your life journey and continuing to be curious and open and recognize trends. There is so much change coming ahead of us that it's important that we recognize the adaptation of that and when we're ready for mainstream and adopt that. And certainly you're a major catalyst for that and really putting a fine point on a topic that was perhaps in the unconscious minds of people into their conscious minds. So I thank you for the great service that you do for our industry, Rex. I'm really excited to hear your presentation today and look forward to sharing it with our audience. Why don't you go right ahead, dive in.
Sounds good. So the research for this presentation is built on the research for the Healthy Workplace Nudge. And it really starts with, hold on a second here, it's not moving. So there we go. So it really starts with a core group of about 120 leaders. This is at GoDaddy. It was our final summit. We've designed these summits to be highly engaging, and the group actually creates the research as we go. My job is to synthesize it and tell the story. And so part of it begins with this individual here. He's the hero of the story. His name is Richard Thaler. He's a Nobel Prize winning economist for a field of economics called behavioral economics, which we'll talk about a little bit further. But what we found is that the process of nudges, which are, it's a part of what's called change architecture or change design. Most of it's been used in the form of shifting policy. So in the United States, for example, he won his Nobel Prize for shifting the way the U.S. Workforce invests in retirement. Up until he came around, we had a system where when you were hired by a company, you were given all these papers to fill out, and one of them was to choose a retirement plan or not. So you had to choose a retirement plan, and because the brain, as he discovered in behavioral economics, the brain is wired to be in 80% of its time in a default mode and only use that precious little bit of high concentrated space and capacity for really important issues or clear issues, but things that are complex tend to drain it. So just like your software licenses, you never read them and you fill it out. That's by design. And what he found is that if he made a simple switch in design, and the design switch was making it an opt-out, in other words, you were automatically signed up for a retirement plan, and you had to choose to opt out. Because of that, participation levels went from about 30% to over 70% in the United States, clearly changing the outlook for a whole generation of people who've been investing in 401ks in the United States. The research we found is that that same kind of shifting in behavior using that default mode could be used in design as well, in physical design, not just policy design. So that was a huge breakthrough for us. So I shared a little bit that the story began in 2013 with the CBRE headquarters project, and that's Lou Horn. He led the charge inside CBRE, and they reached what I called a chasm problem, a problem where you need a guide or a futurist. And a chasm kind of problem is when you come to the end of what's working but have no clue to what the other side of the chasm will look like. The chasm they reached is that during the 2008 Great Recession, CBRE lost 90% of its value as an organization. So coming out of that, Lou said, we have to become a different kind of firm. We have to go from the traditional model of the broker-led art of the deal to a collaborative team approach and leverage all the knowledge we have. We have legal knowledge and we have accounting knowledge, and we've got industrial and commercial and institutional and retail divisions, but they all operated separately. So that was the model, and everybody loved it and agreed to that. But then when he said, and what that looks like is that we're going to have a completely open space, open plan, non-address or free address, that's when a lot of the brokers said, over my dead body. Well, the great story in the book is how he created a let's go and find out approach to change. And it's called From Push to Pull. He engaged about 25% of his office in 8 different areas of research, from technology to sustainability to wellness to art to furniture, and getting this highly engaged group to talk about what could it look like for us to live and work together in the future. That was the breakthrough. And that story has already been told, so I don't have to tell it, but that brought me back to the actually see the headquarters and go, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And they were the very first well-certified corporate space. The first time in history that medical science and building science came together to build a measurably healthy building and create a framework for us to ask the question, how can we live healthier and happier together? So after that, I convened a group of about 10 leaders from around the country, and we asked about the implications and wanted to ask the question, is this a one-off experience, or is this ground zero to something far more important? Out of that, we determined that we needed to see and do some fundamental research. So the fundamental research was, number one, asking the question, what is the problem? What's the business problem that wellness programs are attempting to solve? Our initial assumptions were that wellness is a preventative way to help improve the health outcomes and lower costs. Our job in the commercial real estate facilities design side of the equation is to help supplement or augment what human resources is doing. So we went to kind of the source, and one of the best sources of understanding the problem, and that was Dr. Roizen at the Cleveland Clinic. And he spent 2 days with me. Some of you may know Dr. Roizen as Dr. Oz Mehmet's counterpart. He's a famous writer, 18 best-selling books. He's been on Oprah 28 times. He's about 5'5". He's 74 years old, but he has the biological body of a 55-year-old. And there is an assessment you can take online. It's called the Real Age Assessment that measures your chronological age against your biological age. And his number one concern is the growing rise of chronic disease in the United States and all Western countries, and what that's doing to the health system. And what I didn't realize, I thought that the evil empire was the healthcare system and the pharmaceutical industry. And yes, they may have their piece in it, but that's not the real culprit. That's not the villain. So when he walked through the real problem, I truly walked away stunned, disturbed was probably the better word. And what he shared with me is that in 1984, that was the tipping point in the United States. That is when we began consuming over 400 calories per day per person. Now, what's the implications? The implications is that we're gaining about 1.5 pounds per year. And I was that person in my 30s. I was 196 or 7 pounds. I was just beginning to experience some really uh, life-threatening health outcomes, and I didn't connect the dots. But what I went through really changed my life in terms of health and fitness without even knowing any of these stats. So yesterday or the day before, I just read that now we're consuming over 500 calories per day per person. So what does that mean population-wise? Well, now 70% of Western civilization's population is overweight or obese. Think about that. Being overweight or obese is now a norm. Over 50% of the population, the adult population, has some form of chronic disease. Chronic disease eats 80% of our health costs, and this was the thing that was disturbing. It's rising at a 7% compounded rate per year, and it's been doing that for 40 years, since the 1970s, and there's no slowdown in sight. No program has proven to be able to slow this down at scale. So here's the implications in the United States. Companies now spend, on average, about $12,500 per person. It's a family for insurance. An employee will spend about $500 a month if they have a family on their own for health insurance. But that's going to double in the next 10 years. Not only is that going to double, so that doubles the cost for every company. And it doubles the cost for the federal budget. So if you look at where we're headed right now, health costs consume 18% of the United States gross domestic product. It's a $3.4 trillion expenditure. It's going to top $7 trillion in the next 10 plus years or so. So what he said is somewhere when it reaches about 25% of GDP, he said it's game over for the economy. It's rationing, businesses will shut down, we won't be able to afford to do business in the United States. So you could see why I walked away disturbed. And I also went back and shared this with our group and said, we have an asteroid coming to destroy the planet. Why isn't this the number one conversation on every board room table every Monday? Because when a certain line item cost is growing faster than your profits, at some point in time, it's game over. But because it's a line item in most companies' overall budget, and because it's growing 7%, it may not be visible from year in to year out. So we lose perspective of what's happening. Then we went to look at, well, so what's the solution? The solution has to be wellness. And I went to the number one practitioner of wellness in the United States, Dr. Ron Getzel, and he's at Johns Hopkins. And he's a luminary in the field. And he's written this paper that we reference in the book on the 10 critical factors every organization needs to have an effective wellness program, which I read. And so I asked Dr. Getzel, I said, these 10 factors, having committed, persistent leadership at the top, having a robust communication plan, changing the environment, changing the food selection, having robust data over a period of time of the health outcomes, having strategic objectives. You can already see that's eliminating a lot of companies if all of these things are important. So I asked him directly, I said, Dr. Getzel, tell me, in your estimation, how many companies are doing this? And his exact words were very, very, very few are even capable of doing this. And I said, well, give me a rough estimate as what you think, how many are capable of doing this. He said less than 5% of companies are capable of putting together the kind of program that is necessary to reduce cost and improve health outcomes. And then we started discovering all the myths that were out there, that $1 of wellness returns $3 of investment. There's no research to back that up. And I spent 8 months trying to track down, it's the most cited meme in wellness conferences and any place that talks about wellness. And it's one of these circular things that everybody's referencing themselves, but there's no original research about it. There's one discredited Harvard report, but that's the only thing that comes close. So we found that, one, it's nearly impossible for companies to do it. Two, all the data out there about its effectiveness is false. Three, there's no ROI in spending on wellness. And so I went back to our research and said, okay, we don't have a research project here, or we have to do something else. So that's when we went to look for the alternatives. Now, the number one challenge and the driver of health cost is chronic disease. And chronic disease can be traced to primarily four major lifestyle behaviors: smoking, its abuse of drugs and alcohol, sedentary lifestyle, and overeating of comfort food. Those are the main causes. So when you look at wellness programs and how they're divided into two elements. One is called disease management. And disease management is strictly for that small population of very complex medical issues. And what most people don't realize is that 10% of your work population is driving over 85% of your health costs. Wellness programs, the lifestyle wellness programs that you and I are familiar with, which is, the STEPS programs and the eating and all that, that's only addressing about 15% of the real cost, and of 90% of the people who are eligible for that, only 15% of them actually participate. So now you can see that, number one, wellness programs are not designed to deal with the real problems of disease management. Number two, nobody's participating because we're healthy and we don't really care and we don't need an extra $150 to take some steps. Fundamental structural problem in that. Even the RAND report comes after 10 years of research, and this is Dr. Soren Matke from Munich, but their research showed that at the end of a 10-year program, that there's little or no difference between the health outcomes of someone who participates in a wellness program and not. And when I asked him if wellness works, Dr. Matke said in his Munich accent, well, it depends on what you mean by works. And he said, if you mean, does it lower cost and improve health? He said, no. If you mean, does it improve retention? There's no data to support that. So this was the problem. Now, the big aha for us was when we went to the Mayo Clinic and met with Dr. Ahmed Sood. We had a 2-day summit at the Mayo Clinic, and Dr. Sood focuses on happiness and depression. And what he told us is that we've got the cart before the horse. He said the key issue is stress that drives these behaviors and stress that creates disengagement, but we're focusing on kind of the walking, eating, breathing, drinking side of the equation. And he says, it doesn't matter if you do all that, but you hate your boss, it's still killing you. And so work right now is the fifth leading cause of death. And it's the fifth leading cause of death because of stress. And what stress does to the body is it raises the blood pressure. It sends all kinds of sugar in the form of cortisol and glucose into the system to elevate the heart and to get things to move faster. It lowers your immune system. And stress was only designed as a survival mechanism or a performance mechanism. And it was supposed to be episodic. In other words, if a tiger was chasing me or a bear was chasing me, it was designed for me to either run like hell or fight like hell, or fall dead and play dead. But when it's over with, then my whole system goes back down to normal again. But when it's chronic, when you wake up and you read that email that sets you off and you commute into the office thinking about that email, or you go to bed at night and you ruminate, that chronic stress is shutting down the entire immune system. And more importantly, it's preventing, there's two sides to your body. There's the on switch, which is called the sympathetic nervous system. And then there's the recovery switch, which is called the parasympathetic nervous system. It's not letting us recover. So even when we want to recover, even when we want to get sleep, that stress and that cortisol and the hormones that are in our body prevent us from getting full recovery. So we go in this continuous cycle of being depleted. And we're starting to now see it manifest in the mental health challenges in the workplace. So now the physical health side, now that that's at a tipping point, we're now starting to see it manifest in the mental health side. So our big aha was that chronic stress is the driver behind all these unhealthy behaviors. And so unless we deal with root cause, that's the number one aha, which is getting to stress, which drives comfort food, smoking, drinking, kind of going brain dead, watching, binge watching Netflix. And then human nature. Human nature is the behavioral economics piece. Unless we deal with those two things, we have no shot at shifting this problem. So there's three things we can do. We can shift the behavior through behavioral economics. We can create healthy environments. And that's the well-building aha. That's the breakthrough there. And we can reduce stress in the workplace through design strategies. So let's talk a little bit about nudges. So after the holidays, Lorri, you and I probably made some kind of commitment in January that we were going to be good. Some people do dry January, some people go to the fitness, whatever it is. But imagine that a week or so into January, one of your best friends called, you didn't get to see them over the holidays, and says, let's go to dinner. Let's have a good time. I know just the restaurant. It's brand new. Let's try it out. They say the food is fantastic. But you decide, I'm going to be good. I'm not going to engage in, I'm not going to eat lots of food. I'm going to keep it simple. Maybe a Caesar salad, no croutons, light protein, maybe one glass of white wine. I'm going to be nice. So you do that and you get to the restaurant. But then you notice about 3/4 into a 2-hour dinner that, gee, my wine glass has stayed full the whole time. I wonder what's up with that. Not realizing you probably had 2 or 3 full glasses of wine. And then at the end of dinner, everyone's having a good time and the waiter comes up and they're so clever. They said, how would you like dessert? Well, you're going to sit on your hands. You're not going to raise your hand because you're going to be good. But your friend says, oh my goodness, the chocolate molten cake here is to die for. Let's have one of those and bring 4 spoons with you. You were just nudged. Default mode, engaged in conversation. We're thinking, so how can we use that in a positive way in our environments? That's the cake, by the way. That was a good cake. So Google, for example, they hired Richard Thaler several years ago. One of the things they found is one form of nudge, and you'll see it in that cooler in the back, is that they place all of the really healthy drinks, the Fiji water, the coconut water, the kombucha, all the things I call the California drinks, high at eye level, but it's behind clear glass. In the bottom, it's frosted glass. And that is where all of the unhealthy drinks, you see the red can and a green can and a burgundy outline. So the whole point is that the nudge is that if I'm in default mode and I'm hungry, I will take something convenient and easy that looks healthy and well displayed. But they don't take away the Snickers bar or the M&Ms. You just have to go hunt for them. So if you really want those, you can get those. You just have to go and search. So we have gone out and captured all kinds of suggestions on nudges one of the favorite ones we found was placing a full-length mirror next to a vending machine. We thought that was funny. Not sure if anyone's ever done that, but we thought, what an interesting idea. In Fort Worth, in their city buildings, they have painted their stairwells, made them very interesting, put the word stairwell, W-E-L-L, above them to encourage people to take the stairwell. Some companies have put a 1 second or 2 second delay on the elevator and making the stairwells very easy to get. Offering water as the default beverage. Putting the bad stuff far away in vending machines that you have to walk by everybody so they know, we call it the walk of shame, so they know where you're going. All these are subtle, some humorous ways of nudging people's behavior, but making, the whole point is let's make the preferable choice easy to do. The second part, building well environments. We know through the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States that we spend 90% of our time indoors. And through the Well Building Standard and Fitwell and others, the research they found is that our exposure to indoor air and to lighting and to sound, that's affecting our body temperatures, our hormone balances, our ability to sleep, our abilities to digest. And now we're starting to apply building science and health science, and we're finding out just how much negative impact the environments we've designed are creating for us. And now we're moving forward and doing these things differently. And when you look at the effect of somebody who can concentrate or feels high energy, not drained because of the environment they're in, and we've all seen the numbers that we spend about 1 to 3% of our cost in a building on energy, about 8 to 10% for the real estate, and that includes the build out. But 85 to 90% of the cost is the people. One of the participants, a large tech firm, said, are we squeezing pennies and losing dollars of engagement and health in the way we're doing things? Then creating environments that reduce stress. If you've been to a hospital, you know what bad design does to you. If you're there to see somebody and you're having a hard time through their wayfinding or the rat maze that they create, that's stress inducing. Well, in the environment, if you can create what we call intelligent design or legible space that's intuitively obvious as to what it's there to do and how to find what you need, that has visual access and graphics that do more than just cover up bad design, but really help communicate the story, make you feel connected in a human way, all of those things reduce stress. Conversely, stress is cumulative. So if you're frustrated because you can't find where you need to go, or if it's too noisy, that's generating stress that accumulates over the day. And then when you go home, you find you need to have that extra drink or that extra, a little bit of ice cream, or watch an extra show of Netflix to take care of the pain inside your body of what that stress is creating. User control is the second area that's been tested that helps reduce stress. Using control over their environment. And so having choice on where you work, how you work, the arrangement of your area in your environment all adds to creating an environment that feels calm, that feels safe, that allows you to do your best work and feel engaged. I like to share the strategy that GoDaddy used in terms of reducing stress and leveraging their facility support services group in a program called Employee Experience. And so they worked and partnered with a third-party firm, ISS, to elevate the training of their facility services so that they would deliver an experience similar to going to a Four Seasons or a Ritz-Carlton or a cruise ship. And in fact, they used the metaphor of a cruise ship director as their training. And what they're trained to do is to recognize whether you need help, to think ahead. So for example, if you're frustrated, they will look at you at 10 feet away and they'll give you eye contact. That's part of the training. You give eye contact to an employee at 10 feet away. 5 feet away, you say, "Hey Rex, how was your day?" Well, they will be noticing my body language, and if I look frazzled or frustrated, they'll say, "Hey, is there anything I can do to help you?" And I may say, "Well, I've got 2 meetings and I haven't been able to get this report printed out, and I'm going to be late if I do both." And they will say, "Well, let me take that for you. I'll get it printed for you and collated, and I'll take it to the conference room where you'll be next." That's incredible. And I actually experienced it firsthand when we had our summit there, and I needed to ship some books back to, and materials back to my office. Without even asking, their experienced manager came up and said, "Now that the workshop is over, is there anything you would like us to package up and ship for you?" I just was stunned. But that is part of looking at how do we reduce stress. And it came out of asking the question, what is the experience of our employees from the time they leave the office to the time they come here? What are all the touch points along the way? And let's rate those touch points as either friction points, which create frustration and stress, neutral points, or engagement points, points where people feel uplifted or positive. And so they had an audit of those, and then they were able to go through and talk about specific things they can do to improve the employee experience of those with the facility services people there. Out of this workshop we created what we call a nudge audit. So in a lot of our workshops, we'll hand out these forms for them to go back and just walk through and look at healthy nudges, physical, like is there candy at the reception station, or are there nuts, or whatever it is? Is it a healthy nudge or a unhealthy nudge? Is it a stressful nudge or an engaging nudge? And that's part of what we were able to come away with and help companies with an easy tool. It's a low-hanging fruit, and it gets the conversation started. Here's an example of the 2 forms that we've handed out. If anybody would like a copy of these, feel free to just send me an email and we'll send you the PDFs. So Lorri, we're at the end of the time. It was an incredible journey that we went on, and it's planted the seeds for what I would call what's next. And what's next for us is moving further deeper into the conversation of chronic stress, mental health, and trauma, which is becoming a huge issue and item in the workplace. So taking this more and more into how do we create workplaces where we can bring our best selves to work. In fact, we can bring our whole selves to work, do our best work, and at the end of the day, go home happier and healthier. There's no current standard for companies as to what a healthy workplace looks like. I think that's a great standard that people, if you ask people, they would say, I can bring my whole self to work, I can do my best work every day, and I can go home happier and healthier. And that's something we can create leading indicator metrics to measure and then strategies to attack it. So we're at the end of our presentation.
Rex, thank you so much. I think wherever anybody is at in their wellness journey, that worksheet that you pointed out, which we will make available, downloadable or pointed, we'll provide links to your book, your website, everything just down below at the bottom of this video. Or if you're just listening on the podcast, if you just sign into the community, all of the supporting resources that Rex has mentioned in his books, easy links, just one click away to everything he's mentioning. But that worksheet in particular, I love that, Rex, because it's such a simple way that you can customize, improvement based on wherever you're at in your journey. And whether you're a high-performing organization or just beginning, that continuous improvement framework, it's so simple. Just walking around, identifying any detractors or anything that adds to it, and then developing an action plan from there is a great way to get started. I took so many notes while you were speaking, but a couple of things I just really wanted to underline that I think are so topical for our audience in so many other areas, but just bring them together under this heading around wellness. There's two areas that I've been spending a lot of time in recently, designing programs for our clients. And it's interesting because at first blush you wouldn't think that they're real estate related, but they absolutely are related to corporate real estate. And that is, the first one is around productivity, and that's the physical environment. How do we in real estate enable the productivity of the occupants? And that includes journey mapping and all of those things that you talked about. How do we measure productivity and how do we enhance productivity? And I think a lot of the things that you shared really are so complementary, evidence-based around how we enable productivity. And it's around the process of that. And then the second is around culture, which to me is around the personal side. It's not just the physical environment, but what are we doing to create that great experience, that great culture? And you said so well that it's the number one expense. Well, if you hire expensive, brilliant people and they're disengaged, they're bored, they're not bringing it, you're not contributing to that culture. I love the GoDaddy example. I love that company, and I love that example because, and I think we met that head of real estate in Palm Springs when we were there, right? Like, his name escapes me, but I think one of the best implementations of that program that's so informed by the hospitality industry. So our core business is around facilities management. We're not like once and done. We're not transactional in nature. And we view our role as cast members in the location, and to be able to contribute to the experience and give you an incredible day, and whatever way we can to be able to contribute to that. So it's just so interesting, and you underlined so many great examples of how real estate is affecting the productivity and culture of organizations. And the last thing that I'll say is there's been a lot of talk around how to do it and change management, which is important. One of the things I love about your book is, okay, so I'll use myself as an example. I'm a recovering Gen X, okay? So, I grew up listening to The Clash. I had a funny haircut, like that. A little bit of rebel, you know what I'm saying, right? And we don't like to be told what to do. That's a funny thing about our generation. We love to be inspired. We don't like to be told. But, I think that's a characteristic of most human beings. We don't like to be told what to do. It feels a bit oppressive. But anytime you inspire somebody to do something, or give them suggestions and give them choices and encourage them to do the right thing, like one of the ones that you mentioned earlier, I thought was great, put the full-length mirror in front of the vending machine. I thought that was fantastic. So these nudges, I think, will help people make the right decisions. I think people view change management in the traditional way that it's delivered as very oppressive. And I think the flaw in traditional change management is that it's some full-day workshop that you attend, and then 2 weeks later you're back in your old habits. It has to be a sustained nudge. It has to be as a program. It's not a once and done thing. And that's why I'm so proud as our organization working in facilities management that we really take what your advice seriously. It's not a once and done thing. It has to be continuous. Otherwise, it's like going to the gym once and being expecting to be fit for the rest of your life. You have to do this on an ongoing basis. And so you have to nudge people on an ongoing basis, keep it fresh, and contributing to productivity and culture at the same time. So that's my synthesis of all the notes. I always take so many notes when you speak, Rex. It's just wonderful to hear you talk every time.
Thank you.
So if, this is still, I think if you haven't heard or read Rex's book on this topic, please put it on the top of your list. But as always, I always like to share, leave our audience with practical advice and practical innovation, we call it. So Rex, if somebody is not sure where to begin, or they're just looking to do something simple, what advice would you give them of like one or two things that they could do today to start to embrace this and start taking steps down the path, the journey towards this topic?
Well, if someone is truly interested in thinking we can improve the health and wellness in our office, find others who feel the same way to start out with. Because change management, grassroots, starts with finding those who are equally frustrated with the current condition. So first find your collective of the curious, those interested, and meet and talk. Do a book club, do some research, do some go and see. Then come back and find out, go from the collective of the curious to the cohort of the committed. Who really wants to do something, and then do some low-hanging fruit pilots. Show that, hey, we can shift from bagels and pastry and sugary orange juice to some healthy snacks, and people actually liked it. We can put the vending machine off to another area, or we can find a group who really wants to look at a better way to arrange how we do our work together, and begin that way. There's a chapter in the Healthy Workplace Nudge called How to Lead from the Second Chair. So if you're not in control, how do you create a movement if you're not the one in charge? It's a great place to start.
That's great advice. And I think that more leadership, more organizations with leadership are looking at how to listen to their audience and constituents. We are viewing a lot more of democratization in the workplace, people asking, what would make you more productive? What is your input? Mutual exchanges of feedback and evaluations. So that, I think, is a great way to get a quorum and, start to affect upward decisions. Now, just carrying on with that thread, one of the things that I observe with clients is that there's often a great quorum of people that are healthy or young leaders that are often a wonderful spark to start with something new. But how do you actually take it to the C-suite and get them to, make that decision of investment and to really recognize that, like those productivity stats? Every time you share that, I cringe, because, we are trying to solve for talent. And if we don't address something like that, it will really be a boat anchor with our productivity and our culture. So what are some success examples that you've seen related to that groundswell or that employee community that affects the investment decision at the C-suite?
Well, so it first begins with culture, right? So you have to ask yourself, there's kind of three levels that companies approach wellness from. Most companies approach it from reducing costs and lowering risk mitigation. Those are hard to change because they're just going to try to squeeze the efficiency side of the equation. They're going to squeeze third-party vendors and then begin shifting the cost burden to the employees. Then you've got what I call the more enlightened that look at wellness as a competitive advantage, like the Silicon Valley, West Coast companies that we see. It's a perk, it's an advantage. Then there's the very few in the country, like the Patagonias of the world, or the Southwest Airlines, or the Cummins diesels, that look at this as the fundamental way we treat people. And once you know where you're at, leaders won't change unless it's a business crisis or a personal crisis. And what I'm finding in the coaching that I do with executives is that they're all going through personal stuff, a child struggling, taking care of an elderly parent, some health issues themselves, stress. They're not transparent. So number one is we need a little safer work environment to be able to be ourselves, be transparent. And as soon as a leader is willing to say, hey, look, I struggle with this too, then you can build on it. Otherwise, you have to kind of make your case and build, do a proof of concept and show the straight economic benefit before it'll weave into the more cultural benefit side.
Well, Rex, I think you do such an articulate job of describing this topic as a business imperative. It's not an amenity. It's not a cool thing. It's a business imperative that the companies that are going to survive are the ones that are going to adopt this earlier. And I think employees really appreciate that, employers that are committed to this and really want to make, with the amount of time I spend at work, care about my personal life and helping me be more effective. And I think it's an emblematic of caring. And I do think it's a business imperative. It's not just a trend or something that's cool or an amenity. It's something that is a necessity for business and managing risk and attracting talent in the future. So thank you for doing such an articulate job and continuing to reinforce the importance of this. But the tools and the case studies that you've described in your book really make ambassadors of your message. You've really equipped us with a lot of great information and case studies we need to carry your message forward. And I don't even know how many times I've recommended your book, and I continue to do so. So thank you.
My kids thank you for the recommendations.
Yes, no problem. Well, thank you so much. As I mentioned, all of those resources that you've been so generous with today will be one click away, including all of your books at the bottom of this episode. Rex Miller, thank you so much. If somebody wants to follow you, or can you just promote your website and yourself so people can follow you directly?
Well, LinkedIn is probably the one area where you can see most of what's going on. My life is a walking lab experiment, and I post it, but also all the insights. And then my website is it's www.rexmiller.com, so it's easy to find.
Great. Well, thank you again for so much for your time and your great insights today, Rex. This is Lorri Rowlandon signing off of this episode of Leading Innovation at Work, the Wellness at Work edition. Thank you so much. Please don't forget to download the resources that we mentioned and sign in. And we'll see you on the other side. Thanks for joining us today.